Well, good evening, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope blog and podcast. I'm really blessed today. I'm speaking with Dean Butler, and if you're watching the video, his face probably looks really familiar. But he played Almanzo Wilder in the Little House on the Prairie series. That's his iconic role that he's played. He actually has a memoir coming out in summer that details his time on Little House as well as moving forward. I believe it's called Prairie Man, right, Dean?
That's correct, Danielle. Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond is what the full title of the book, published by Kensington Publishers in New York.
And people can pre-order it. Is it just through Amazon? Or where can
I
they
think you can also
pre-order?
order, I think Barnes and Noble. It's
Okay.
also orderable there as well if someone wants to order it there. So yeah, no, I tell you, writing a book was the last thing I imagined I was going to do. It was not a burning need of mine to do it. But as I began to focus more on the 50th anniversary of the series coming up and thinking about the significance of that, and you know, timing is a lot of what makes these things work. And so it made sense. And knowing that no one else in our cast was doing a book for the 50th that I was aware
Okay.
of, and there may well be someone, but if there is, I don't know about it. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but I don't know about it. So it just made sense to me to step in and say, okay, we're going to do this. And so I wrote a proposal, and I sent it around to some friends to look at, and got some nice comments on it. And I sent it to my friend Mary McDonough, who played the daughter Erin on the Waltons.
Yeah.
And Mary is published by Kensington. She's done 3 books for them, and so she sent it into her editor, and he wrote me the next day and made an offer. And so I
Wow.
said, okay, this is obviously meant to be. It never was submitted anywhere else. I didn't shop it anyplace else. I just said, I'm very grateful. Let's go. So on January 9th of 2023, I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and sat down with a cup of coffee in front of my computer, and based on the outline I created, started writing, and uh, finished on July 31st and submitted it to the publisher. So it's been a very intentional journey.
Well,
And so here we
I wanted to ask you, some actors and actresses really don't like being remembered for an iconic role. So
mm,
when people bring it up, it's kind
mm.
of like, yeah, I know I did that. Please mention something else. Um, even if,
What else? I mean, like, what else? If you're not going to mention the thing that you're loved for, then why would you talk about something else? I mean,
well,
I
I,
don't.
I wanted to ask you, why does it not bother you? Because you embrace it, you've run with it, you've done so many different things with it,
Yeah,
and it does
yeah.
kind of define your career whenever anyone
Oh,
thinks
no
about you.
question. Yeah,
What,
it does.
what, how do you think about it that way?
I think the way I've looked at it, Danielle, is that I came to believe early on that actors get the parts they're supposed to get.
Mm,
And, you know, when people are casting a part in, it's different when you're working in college, or you're working in high school, or you're working regionally in a smaller community. People can get cast in all kinds of parts that they may never get a shot at in a larger professional environment. Going into a casting in Los Angeles or New York, you are competing in the biggest pool of talent in the world in those
yeah.
two cities. Um, and the people who are sitting behind the desks in those offices are very astute about what they're looking for. And casting decisions are made in about 7 seconds when an actor walks in the door. I mean, you may not get the part, but a casting director knows in about 7 seconds if you could get the part. as opposed, and they also know in all likelihood in 7 seconds, there's no way this person's going to get this part. And I think it's because casting directors are, oh, they've got their human perceptional, and we all do this. We all make judgments about everybody that we meet, and we
Yeah.
we have a million decisions in seconds. Not a million. We make a lot of decisions about people in a very few seconds of meeting them. And casting directors are not only doing that for themselves, but they're doing it for the audience of the shows that they're doing. And when you get responded to in a particular way for a certain kind of show or a certain kind of vehicle, maybe at first you think, well, I don't want to be pigeonholed as that. But I decided quickly, for whatever reason, Danielle, I decided that that was not going to be a problem for me. Uh,
Hmm.
I accepted the fact that I brought a certain something into a room with me, and what I brought was innately part of me. I had nothing to do with it on a large level. I
Yeah.
was created this way. I'm born of two parents who operate in the world in a particular way, and I grew up in a family that shaped me in a particular way. And what I walk in the door with is what I've got. And that's sort of the foundation of whatever I'm going to do as a talent. And I think I did struggle with that for a while, but I think as I went on, and maybe I'm contradicting myself, because I'm thinking about this in a slightly different way. I think in the beginning, as an actor, as a young actor, you want to think that you can do everything because
Yeah.
you're an actor. I can be this, I can be this, I can be all of these different things. And that may be true in a certain environment, but in a professional environment, you're going to get cast in a particular niche
Yeah.
because there are because of the impressions that you bring into a room with you. And ultimately, I think it's much more helpful to embrace those things than it is to fight against them. And look, some people do fight against it, and they can do really well fighting against it. Um, but for me, I just thought, and I liked the way I was getting cast. I liked the response I was getting. Now, look, the parts that I've gotten throughout my life have not been necessarily complicated people. They're not, there's not a lot of psychology in these characters. For the most part, I mean, if I'm really being, clear about it, most of the characters I have played in my career really was as a young man. I haven't really pursued acting in over 20 years now, but I was sort of an object in a way. Um, I was perceived as this, as a, um, I guess as a kind, thoughtful young man. I mean, I think that's what Susan Sukman saw when I came in the door to read for Little House. It's what um, Mary Goldberg saw when I walked in the door to read for Forever. When I, was doing the Judy Blume novel, that's what she saw. Um, and I think that sort of set the template for me as to
Hmm.
how I was going to be perceived. And I have to say, and particularly in the case of Little House, it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride for me. To be associated with something that is as beloved and admired as Little House is,
Yeah.
uh, has been just this incredible gift.
You mentioned the way you were perceived. Do you find that the way you are portrayed in films is what you're like, in your personal life?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I'm pretty much what you see. I mean, look, actors are always the circumstances a character is in, you're pushing on certain buttons and who you are, you're reaching for certain aspects of yourself. But I think particularly when you're working in front of a camera, I think there are actors who can hide, who can hide some deeper part of themselves. Um, but I think that's really hard to do in front of the camera
Hmm.
because the lens looks right into your soul. It's a very invasive, revealing thing. I don't think that's not as true on the stage. I mean, you can play things on a stage. An actor can play things on a stage that could be a long way away from who they are, and that sort of what makes the stage really fun,
Hmm.
because you've got that distance. There's the distance between you and the audience, and it becomes about so much about posture and costuming and vocal projection and, but all of these things that communicate sort of archetypal qualities about people in front of the lens. That lens is looking right into your eyes, and our eyes don't lie, and I think the audiences can tell if you are lying. I think
Hmm.
they may not be able to say, oh, that's not real, but they know something's not right.
Yeah.
They know it's not really connecting for whatever reason, and who knows. But so I think when you're really working well, you're working honestly, and you're not, as our old friend colleague Victor French, who played Mr. Edwards on Little House, used to say, you can't be an observer and a participant at the same time. You've got to be
Hmm.
all in as the actor, or you can be detached from it and be the director on the other side, but you cannot direct yourself as you are working. I mean, maybe if you're really like Michael Landon could do anything, he could direct himself as he's performing. Michael knew so well what he was doing. Um, for me, as the young actor who I was really just like, trying to, in the beginning, just trying to get through every day,
Yeah.
um, it was much more fruitful to just be honest, and to the task was really to bring myself more than anything else. And I think that's really hard to do. When I auditioned for the part, the note that I got before going in for the final meeting is, whatever you do, don't act, for Michael Landon. And that was terrifying to me because I thought, well, I'm supposed to be an actor here. If I'm not acting, what am I doing? And it sort of flipped me out. But as I thought about it, and as I've thought about it in the years since, of course, when you watch the performances on Little House, it's a very, the level of performance is pretty naturalistic, on
Yeah.
Little
It
House.
is.
There are exceptions to that. I mean, Catherine McGregor worked bigger as Mrs. Olson. Alison Arngren worked bigger as Nellie Olson. But most of the characters in the program were operating in this very real zone. And I
Yeah.
think that's what made them so compelling and likable.
Well, I was gonna ask you, a lot of the characters from Little House have passed away, especially the older prominent characters like
Yeah.
Michael Landon and then Nellie's parents.
Mhm.
And for you, how does that feel kind of seeing, all these people you worked with one by one, over time, with age, with whatever comes with, sickness, whatever, pass
Yeah,
away.
I
And
know.
knowing too that, eventually that might be something, I mean, that's something you're gonna face. And how
Yeah,
does that,
yeah, something we're all going to face.
yeah,
Everyone's going to face that.
but it's interesting because I was talking to Bonnie Bartlett several
Mm.
months ago, and she told me that to her it wasn't a scary thought because she would live on in the work she had done.
Mm.
And so for her,
Mm.
it was
Okay.
kind of like, well, I'll always be, I don't really care if I die. I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate, but like it happens. But everyone, I'm still gonna live on, and people will be able to see that. Like for you, does dying or does that give you distress, or for you is it like, I've served my part, I've done what I needed to do, I've done the best I can. Like for you, how's that perspective?
That's a pretty probing question, Danielle. I think, in the context of the work that we've all done, like Bonnie, I'm very grateful to live on in these performances, that have been out there for me for starting 45 years ago, and uh, they live on. I think, in the larger human level, I haven't faced yet I think there's probably that turning point in every life where look, at 67 years old, my mortality is a real thing. At 25, 23 years old, when, I'm starting this adventure,
Oh, yeah.
what's mortality? I mean, there's no mortality. I'm going on. And like most young people, you're going on forever. You're untouchable. At 67, I know there's an end. I don't know when it is or how it will come, but it's very real for me that it will come. And I guess, Danielle, I hope I can be graceful about it. And however it comes, I hope I can be graceful and accepting of whatever my fate will be. And not only for my own ease of mind, but for those around me, where
Mm.
we've all seen, if you've lived long enough and seen enough passing in your life, different people live
Yeah.
through that time in their lives in very different ways. Um, I've seen people struggle with their coming mortality and fight against it. And I've seen people in my life who have said, it's my time and I've lived a great life and I'm ready to go. And that the latter approach is where I hope I will be when the time comes. That I will
Yeah.
be accepting that I've done whatever it is I'm going to do and had the life I'm going to live, and have, hopefully, we all have regrets. We're all going to have regrets, but relatively few regrets, hopefully. And and just let it ride at that point.
Is there something you still really want to do before that point that you
Oh,
don't think you've done?
I mean, if I could have picked any career away from this, or as part of this work, I think I would have. I think if I could have picked one thing, it would have been to be a really, really successful voiceover artist or announcer, narrator. Um, I love that work, and I think
Hmm.
it goes back to being a young man and listening to John Facenda narrate NFL films, and there are some great, great voices that are incredibly evocative and communicative, and
Yeah.
um, out there doing this work. And to have the opportunity, and I love the idea of being, in voiceover terms, the voice of God. I love being that authority voice, where you are the facts, and you're telling the story, and the the people that speak around that are supporting the story, but that narrator is providing the audience with the narrative thrust of
Yeah.
the story. I really like that, and I love people who love listening to people who do that well. Um, that's, I'm not going to say it can't happen. It's probably not high on a percentage list of things that are going to happen at this stage of my life, but it's work that I enjoy enormously. I look forward to sitting down in front of a microphone and recording a script, and bringing whatever it is that, and most of the things that I narrate are very human stories. They are
Yeah.
profile stories, those kinds of things where you're telling about somebody's life. And I love being that storyteller. So it's fun for me. I really enjoy it.
Do you think you might do that for your own book, maybe a year from now or so after it's published,
Well,
have an
if
audiobook?
yeah, I would love to read my own book. I'd be curious how someone else would read my book, but I think it's natural given that I should read my book. Um, it would be an interesting way, when you read something, when you read a book, the words that you're reading hit you in a particular way when you, as the reader. It's when you are listening to a conversation, the person who's speaking has an opportunity to shape those words
Yeah.
in an interesting way. There's more nuance in the spoken word, I think, um, that you can add something to what's been written with the spoken word. You've got a little more control over what the impression is, and I would like to be able to, based on some things that I know that I've written in the book, I would love to have the opportunity to put the nuance that I'm looking for, that I was thinking about as I wrote them, into those words so that there's no question or doubt about what I was trying to say. That would be I would enjoy that opportunity. I think, look, if there's going to be an audiobook of my book, I think I will get the opportunity to do that. I can't guarantee that, but I think I would probably get the opportunity to do that. If I
Do
do, I'll
you,
have a good time doing it.
yeah, no, and I'm sure people would listen to it too, because you do have a good voice. I was gonna ask, do you think voice acting requires more of an actor than just acting in front of a TV? Oh, well, in front of a camera?
I think it's a different skill because you are, like, reading commercial copy is really a craft. If
Yeah,
you're talking about that kind, or when you're doing a character for animation, you're providing a lot of information for an animator. I mean, generally you're reading something, well, depending on what stage, and it probably depends on the project. I mean, some projects are you as the voiceover actor or the voice actor are recording something on the highest level. You are recording a script that probably hasn't been animated yet, and what you are
yeah,
bringing is informing the animation in some way. And a lot of it, a lot of high level animation that we see in cinematic animation, so much of the animation is built around our perception of who that person is that we know is reading. And when you hire famous voices,
yeah,
that becomes part of the characterization of the animation. If you're doing something that, like game animation or something like that, where the character has been drawn, it's been, all of that has been done, then you're looking at that character and you're hopefully, you have to bring some part of you that you believe is helps that character advance their task in the game.
yeah,
And so you're playing more into caricatures, I think, at that point. And most of these characters are drawn very strongly so that they're, you sort of know instantly when you look at an animation character who that character is in the life of the story. And so you try and bring that. And then in commercial copy, I think you have to understand what the message is. You have to understand what's being sold
right.
and what the problem and what the solution is, and the turning point between the problem and the solution. And your voice has to present the problem and the solution in
Yeah.
a turn of a phrase. So there's a skill level involved with that is, it's not just about the voice, it's about your understanding of what you're reading. And that's really important.
Do you have like an audiobook or story that you like listening
I
to? Do you
don't.
have the No?
Oh gosh, that's really interesting. And now,
I
of
was gonna
course, the
say
name.
you have to have
Well,
one if you're so passionate
they
about it.
well, I listen. I love listening to Peter Coyote, who narrates a lot of the Ken Burns documentaries. Um, the and now his name escapes me, and I'm going to look it up. But oh, I feel awful. I can't think of his name. I loved his read. Um, he's an author who narrated Ken Burns' first documentary or first big documentary, the Civil War. And
Mm,
his name will pop in my head here any second. But there was something in the sound of that voice, the empathy and the warmth of that voice, the telling of that story that just really gripped me.
yeah.
In reading in the audio books for Little House, what is her name? This is awful. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, of course, but this is my own doing. I didn't.
It's totally okay.
Um, Cherry Jones is the actress who reads the Little House books. She's great. I mean, she does all the characters. She has a wonderful rhythm. There is a earthiness in her sound, which is perfect for the way the books, or the way Laura wrote the books. It's a very straightforward, uncomplicated kind of storytelling. Cherry Jones reads the books beautifully. Uh, um, I when I listened to her recordings of all the Little House books, I was knocked out. I said, "Wow, this is." I mean, she's sharing these stories in a really wonderful, accessible, uh, atmospheric way. I thought
Yeah.
she was great.
Well, you're talking about story, and I think love Little House. I still watch it now. In fact, I find it to be the TV show I turn on the most, especially when I'm having a hard day or whatever, because it's just so warm, also, family friendly in the sense that, there's not a hot, there's stressful episodes, but it's not the kind of tension that you experience with high impact epic kind of films or even series now.
Yeah.
Um, and I want,
There's
do you,
I would say this about Little House, Danielle, just to sort of, I think there's very little moral ambiguity in Little House.
yeah,
You know, the the good guys are the good guys and the bad guys are the bad guys. And that's a very traditional kind of storytelling. In today's storytelling, there is much more nuance because writers, it's like I wonder how much writers are writing to inform about the human condition. I mean, look, people are very complicated. They can
yeah,
be very complicated. So showing that is really interesting and a challenge and important to do. Michael Landon in his writing, I think, was more interested in the clarity of moral choice. He was
yeah,
teaching about good behavior and not good behavior, positive attributes and negative attributes. And then and people could use that as a way to inform their interactions with their children. Children could use it to inform their interactions about how they're going to, how who they want to be in the world.
yeah,
And Little House offered very clear views of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why you as an audience member, why I as an audience member, and why so many people love it, because it's very, very clear who everybody is.
yeah. I was gonna ask you, do you think that the storytelling of now in films is has enhanced? Or in some ways do you miss because there's no shows like Little House now. I don't
Right.
think there's gonna be anymore. I think it's kind of a lost because I mean to be honest, it's not that Little House is slow. That's not the right word, but it's not there's not a lot of high action. It is very story driven with a family
Yeah.
and it centers around them.
Yeah.
So like for you, do you think that storytelling has enhanced now in film, or do you kind of miss the human um the humanity almost
Mm.
center of the older films?
Well, I think it's what we look. I think films and television are always a reflection of the larger culture. And I think that when Little House was introduced, America was just experiencing its first one of the major shock waves in contemporary American history, and that was the resignation of a president of the United States, Richard Nixon, who
Yeah.
resigned and walked away from the White House in the August before Little House premiered in September. And America had been through this horrible ordeal of the White House scandal,
Yeah.
or the Watergate scandal, and the really, I think, unsettling sense for maybe the first time in our modern history where we could see that we got to see in almost in real time the failures or the personal failures of a leader. And I think it was shocking
Mm.
to the country, and it was hard to deal with that. And I think the reverberations of that have carried us forward into a kind of ambiguity of character that we see all around us today. I think Little
Mm.
House came on the heels of that. And I think one of the reasons the show succeeded is is that it was a return, a very quick return to values and an understanding of how to live that was an American ideal, um, that Watergate shattered in for a great many people. I mean, look, 20 years earlier, America was shattered by the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That was a horrifying event, and many Americans watched it happen on television. Um, we certainly knew about it very quickly on television,
Yeah.
but it was a horrible event, and people were devastated by it. It was different in the sense that, at least as you looked at it, John F. Kennedy was an innocent victim in
Right.
this. Richard Nixon, and look, I grew up as a young Republican. I still am a Republican in my registration, although I'm appalled by the direction my party has gone. Um, but Richard Nixon showed the imperfection,
Yeah.
the insecurity that in the human condition that I think really shocked people. We didn't expect that from our leaders. I think we expected more from them, and sadly, we've reached a stage where we expect next to nothing
Yeah.
from our,
It's true.
and which is why America is so struggling right now, because it's very hard to believe in what's coming at us right now. Um, and that's hard. That's a hard place to be, and I'm not sure, how the country copes with that. But shows like Little House give people a little bit of a respite from that, where life is simpler, it's clearer, outcomes are more understood, consequences for behavior are, you see consequence.
Yeah.
Right now we see behavior and there is no consequence for it.
Right.
And I think that's very, very unsettling to the public as a whole. Not
Well, I
good,
was
not good.
well, I was gonna ask you, how do you cope with it? Because I know that some people, were super passionate about politics, even young people that I knew before. And now it's like it's not really, no one wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to even, it's like, no, I don't even care. I don't even know if I'll vote because I don't really
Yeah,
have anybody I know about or even care about. And the people that I
yeah,
can choose from, I'm not passionate about at all.
yeah.
Like for you, have you kind of shifted where, politics just let it do its thing, and that's not where my hope is anymore. Or do you still really hope that things will be different?
Oh, I do hope I remain hopeful that as a country we can work this out. It's going to have to happen at the ballot box, and it's going to have to happen at the ballot box over and over and over again to, to get us back into some sort of an equilibrium, or a place where we can trust each other again. I, I think what's so hard about our political life today, and this has been said many times, there's no new ground here. You can't have a conversation about differences anymore.
No. Yeah.
There's very little civil discussion of differences. We're so tribal about this that if you don't believe it's all or nothing. I mean, you're all with me or you're the enemy. And there's no room for there's no room for respectful disagreement anymore,
Yeah.
or very little room for that in the most public of the discourse we have. I think in quiet spaces, in offices or rooms and homes, people can perhaps have more nuanced conversations where there's not blood on the table if you
Yeah.
disagree. But
Yeah.
um, I think in public terms, we live in a world of extremes now, and yet I don't think that most of us do not live in a level of extreme. Most people in the world live somewhere in the middle spectrum. I don't know anybody who's dead center in the middle. We're a little to the right, we're a little to the left. Most people do not live on the edges
Right.
where all of the noise comes from. Most people live in the middle where you just want civility and you want things to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, the people who are the bomb throwers of our society, and I say that figuratively, the bomb throwers of our society, they are looking to move the culture in a way, and you only can do that. You influence from the edges, you have to lead from the middle. You can't
Yeah.
lead on the edges because you can't get enough traction to lead from the edges. But there's a lot of noise that can be made on the edges, and we're hearing it. We're hearing a ton of noise on both ends of the spectrum, and very little of it is productive. You can't the country can't function from the edges. It has to function from the middle. That's my opinion. And you could have a guest on next week that said, no. I mean, who knows what someone else is going to say, but that's my perspective about that, Danielle.
Well, because I want to be respectful of your time, I do have one last question for you.
Okay.
What would you like to see if you could pick one thing? What
Hmm.
would you like to see in your lifetime change about the world?
Hmm. Oh boy, Danielle, that's a huge, huge question. I guess if we're looking at the totality of the world, and it may be Pollyanna-ish to say this, but my father was a very conservative guy. He was he saw the world in a particular kind of through a particular prism, and made judgments about people based on that prism. And yet on the other side of that, he was a person who would say about people, and he used a bar example, when people getting along with each other, he'd say, the world is a long bar. There's room for everybody at the bar. Everyone can talk to who they want to at the bar. And of course, it's figuratively about, a bar where you go in and order a drink. And I think he was right about that. And I guess if I'm looking at the world right now, Danielle, I'd like to see us really be able to function at a lawn bar where it's okay to come to the bar however you come to it, and be, if you can be okay with yourself and other people be okay with you and with themselves, everyone can be there, and it shouldn't be an existential threat. I hope it's not an existential threat as to who's at the bar at a
Right.
given time. I'd love to see us all be able to be at the bar and be okay.
Well, Dean, I want to thank you. It's fascinating. I love getting to see where conversations go, and I've learned a lot, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Danielle, thanks for having me. And you ask good questions, and you just you gave me room to talk, and so thank you for that. And I hope your audience enjoys the conversation, and you do a good job. And you have a future in this, Danielle. You need to keep going.